Philosophy of science explains science. Now, if this usage of the word explain is new to you, then what I can suggest is that you learn from your previous usage of the word explain, and that previous usage may be that science explains observation. That means you know that what you have an idea what does that mean, and I guess whatever is your idea, that will be same or similar to saying that that science tells you why we have seen this, what we have seen, not something else. So why this observation? So if you develop that association, if you understand this association that explains is associated with why this, then this suggests to you that if you have to understand why philosophy explains science, the answer would be that philosophy answers why that this particular science, which is successful in that which describes reality, which is successful, which makes successful predictions. So, what are characteristics of science which makes successful predictions? That is the topic of this lecture, and in that I have to point out that the success of science is a statement about scientific results, in which the word is used, because this is describing science. But before that, before getting scientific results, you have to do science. So that means before results, before description of reality, science is an activity. If science is done, to do this activity, to do science, scientist, here the word is not is. Here the word, because we are instructing to a person, we should say scientists should aim at universality or objectivity. So that's the second aim of the lecture, is to introduce this famous word of objectivity. So these are the aims of the initial introduction, and then I go in actual content. I said it there we can learn the usage of the word explain by trying to understand what does that mean to say that science explains observation, and I suggest that means that science tells why this observation. Now, why this, if you do not understand, if you do not pay attention to, or if you, anyway, I have to suggest what do I mean by saying why this observation, and one thing I can do is I can show motion of a ball at different times, and the question I can pose is that why we see that observation, why this ball rises and then falls, why this sequence of observation, why not something else? Here, if you want to learn the usage of the word explain, then you don't be limited to this particular application. Ball, of course, the explain is not limited to ball, but you learn from this the lesson which you can use somewhere else as well, and that lesson could well be that explain explains answers why. If you agree that, then you use this association to get an understanding of the role of philosophy, which I started this lecture with, namely that philosophy explains science. So this association of explains with why, if you agree to that, then philosophy explains science would mean philosophy tells why this science that we know and is useful. If that is a question, then a very popular answer is the question becomes what is good about science? Why that science? If that's a question, the popular answer is that science describes reality. And I deal with this sentence in two ways. One is one common, non-philosophical, common person's usage of this. To see that, I take the word reality, and I see its usage, the meanings of the word reality. Dictionary.com tells you that the meaning of the word reality, which is okay, which is used in philosophy, but you can understand, even if you are not a philosopher or if you have not studied philosophy, you can understand what is being said. And that dictionary.com says that the meaning of reality is that something that exists independently of ideas concerning it. And I think that this is a common usage as well, not necessarily philosophical. And a comment on the whole situation is that, this is my comment, that directly this means that science is, the concept describes reality, and reality is independent of ideas. So science is also independent of ideas, or you can say science is independent of particular ideas or particular observation, and science explains all observations, or science is composed of universal statements about rules which apply everywhere. And that is a quick way of saying all this is that science is universal. So that is so when we say universal, what do we want to say? If that's the question, then to get the answer, you see definition of scientific objectivity. And previously I used the word universal, and but the more common usage is objectivity. And first I take you the definition of the word objectivity. You learn what is the purpose of that, and then I argued that the same purpose is achieved by this previous word universal as well. But if you are looking for a definition, then you will get more easily definition with this word objectivity. And anyway, whatever you call it, objectivity or universality, basic idea is that whatever is universal or objective, that is not or should not be influenced by biases or personal interests or community preferences. So that is the thing. Basic purpose is that if there are persons or community involved and they express their opinion, then that opinion will be biased, and it will be their opinion. So it will not be an opinion of everyone else, so it will not be universal. But I hope you have understood this aim. We have to discuss what is the proper word for it, objectivity or universality. But if you have, first you understand the aim. And the aim is to get rid of personal preferences or community bias. And one thing I can add to this discussion is that if you don't use scientific measurements, then you are, as a human being, you are seeing or watching. So that may a personal element may appear in that, and you may get, and a person may do a kind of mistake in understanding, or two different persons may give different descriptions. But if you use scientific instruments, your results will be not biased, not personal, not influenced by personal preferences. So all this, there too, so far I have described the aim, what you have to get. Now there are two technicalities remain. One is what is the proper word for this aim? Objectivity or previously what I said, universality. That's one thing. And another thing is that the aim is achieved or aim should be achieved. Now, first I tell you the difference between is and should is the topic of slide number 7, I think. But here, the first target is the difference between the word objectivity and the previously used the word universality. Now, to discuss that difference, first I have to say what the word objectivity means. What is the literal meaning of the word objectivity? Previously I think I have told you what is the literal meaning of the word universality. Universal means for everyone and not for any community and not any bias, not any person. But universal word, I hope, is not not uncomfortable for you. But objectivity may be new word, and then I tell you this objectivity means, in English you say a subject sees an object. I see an apple. I am subject, and what I see is object. Now, the aim, I'm telling you, that we should get rid of personal influences, personal opinion. So person is I, person is subject. So personal, if you want to get rid of personal opinion or personal or community of persons, biases or preferences, then the word objectivity suggests it that the way to get is that you get rid of persons, you get rid of subjects. You only talk about objects. So rather than universality, if you use the word objectivity, what you want to emphasize more is that if there are persons involved, they do mistake. So get rid of person, don't mention persons, don't mention any human being in knowledge descriptions, and don't say that we see that metals expand on heating, or we see that all heavy things fall to the ground, or we see that. Just say metals expand on heating or heavy things fall to the ground. Do not mention any person, because if you bring person, you can possibly bring bias or error. Now that is about objectivity emphasizes, which is in a way maybe it's appealing to imagination, but I think it's not logically that's not a good choice, because by removing persons, you not only remove error, but by removing persons you also remove knower, and if you have removed knower, then where's knowledge? How can you can have a knowledge without knower? And but those who prefer the word objectivity, they even are ready to say that much, even that knowledge is possible without knower. What they mean to say is, I would prefer the word universality. Universality means there are knowers, and we have to make a target of comparing, communicating between knowers, and somehow selecting only those statements out of all these knowers which are universal, where there is not disagreement. The way could be that one person make a statement and others they can't reasonably say that person is wrong. Now there are difficulties in achieving that. So that's why people think it is simpler to imagine that there are no persons. So if there are no persons, these are not difficulties which you are feeling, or simply they are not doers of errors. Then there is no error. Okay, that's an imagination, and that is this imagination is a very old history, and this imagination was started by Plato. And Plato has I don't have time to describe history as a description of some analogy of cave persons in caves, and that they don't know the reality, and reality is not what they see. Reality is outside the cave, and reality is independent of what we see. And then presently, philosophers of science called Popper, who is basically logician, a very good logician, even he goes to the extent of saying knowledge without knower, although logically this doesn't make sense, because if there's no knower, how can be knowledge? But this imagination is so strong that, and then I can give another example of physicist, which has got now Nobel Prize, Roger Penrose, who thinks this is reality independent of this Platonic reality, which is independent of us, of human beings that exists. So this idea is so strong that it is not it is maybe not logical, or maybe I can say even against logic, but that is very appealing, and that I think rather than opposing it, I think we should try to understand what these great minds want to say. Their words are illogical, but their aim is not illogical. If as an ideal, this is a very good ideal, that if you can get a knowledge which is free from error, free from person opinion, that would be if I would like as well. But I mean, if I say rather than objectivity, use the word universality, I mean to say that there are objectivity is not actually possible to achieve, because whenever when you claim this sentence is objective, it has to be uttered by some person. So you can get rid of person. Anyway, this technicality, I leave it here. Whatever you call it, universality or objectivity, basic thing is you should not be influenced by personal interest or bias or community bias. And now I go to another thing that the next discussion is, here it was, we should say, science is free of bias, or science should be free of bias. To start that discussion, I take you again to the sentence which I spoke in the previous slide now, that science describes reality. Now, if you ask why science describes reality, then the answer is what is technically called scientific realism, and which is, I take the wording from a recognized philosophy of science book titled What is This Thing Called Science by Chalmers. Chapter 15 says that science describes reality because science is successful. And science has so many successes that if science does not describe reality, that it would be a miracle that it has success and again success and again success. So there cannot be so many miracles. So actually the reason for it, and reason is that science describes reality, and that's why science is successful. That is an explanation of success of science. You know, the side issue is that I started this lecture by saying that you have to learn how can it be that philosophy explains science. Here you are saying Chalmers is explaining, okay, not science, but explaining success of science. So if success of science can be explained, then similarly science can be explained. If an explanation of science is philosophy of science. Okay, that's maybe a side issue, and we come back to what is there, that science describes reality because science is successful, and successful means it has successful predictions. Now, you know, I was on the topic of comparing is with should. To that end, I point out that to make successful predictions, you have to do this activity called science. So first has to be activity, only then results which are successful. So before results, before saying science is free from bias or is free from that, first thing is the scientific results are free from bias. But if results are there, they are achieved by an activity, and for activity you have to do science. If you have to do science, and there should be instructions for those, and there have to be those persons who do science, mainly scientists. And if you have to tell scientists, you have to use the word should, that you should not be biased. I mean, it's enough saying to scientist is there, and scientist has to prefer his or her personal opinion or a universal opinion, has to choose between them. At that stage, it doesn't make, this is not of any use to say that science is free from bias. I mean, at that moment, you have to say, you are a scientist and you should be free from bias. So scientists should try to get results which are free from bias. Free from bias means, if you prefer the word universality, then free from bias, the way to get rid of bias is that make sure that you can defend whatever you say against any criticism. Namely, no one can say that you are wrong, and if someone says, you are able to defend it. So that means if it is your personal bias preferences, there will be many persons who would point out that, and you will not be able to defend that. So the honesty demand that do not make unnecessarily claims. You should try to make only those claims which are universal, which means no one can say it is wrong. Or if you want to use objectivity word, then you can say that should aim at objectivity. At this time, my topic is not universality or objectivity. My topic is whether we should use is or we should use the word should. And I think should is so important that even if you say is, you have to say we should use is. So you can't get rid of the word should. Anyway, if should is important or not, I have to introduce the word for should, technical word, and then I finish this lecture. The technical word for should is normative. To introduce that terminology, I have two previous terms to be introduced. And the first term is value. And this is Wikipedia says that value is in ethics. I describe the definition of ethics later. First, concentrate on the word value. Value means you say something is good. You may say something, but if I'm talking about scientific activity, then more concerning is what action is good, because scientific activity is an action, it's not a thing. So the word value can be used for things as well, but for this course I mean usage of the word value as for action. So that is one. And now I go to the word ethics and then normative. Ethics is a branch of philosophy. Encyclopedia Britannica says that there are 4 major branches of philosophy. Ethics is one of them. And ethics involves systemizing, defending and recommending concept of right and wrong behavior. Here the Wikipedia has specialized to actions because behavior is an action. And that is what I want to concentrate on that. And the purpose of concentration is eventually to introduce the word normative for should. So the technical description is complete if I describe the definition of normative statement, which according to Wikipedia is that normative statements make claims about how institutions should be designed, how to value them, which things are good or bad. No, institutions are not my topic, things are not my topic. My topic is the word should, the association of the word should with normative. And here what I mean in this lecture is should do science this way or that way. And this means I'm talking about should do an action, because doing science is an action in a right way, not wrong way. So that is you should do in a right way. Right means, as I said, in more objective way or more universal way. You should do it. That's the topic here. So should, and technical word for should is normative. So that's all I said, and now I summarize at the end again, and then I finish. Sorry, before that, I have a slide which gives you even some more practice of this word normative. And that is that a normative statement is not scientific. A scientific statement is descriptive. So, and a comparison, for comparison, you can pay attention to this example that when you say children should use vegetables, that's a normative, as I said before. And but if you say vegetable contains a relatively high proportion of vitamins, that contains is the present tense is a description. So scientific results do not use the word should. Scientific results use the word is. So scientific results describe, and people say describes reality is a claim. So that is science. But if you say activity of science, that should word use, and that is normative. So scientific results are descriptive, scientific activity is normative. And when I say scientific, I say, and most of people say, by scientific they mean scientific results. And if they describe reality, they are not biased. R is for scientific results. But behind that or before that is scientific activity. And in doing science, you should use the word should. You should not be biased. So the results are descriptive, and activity is normative. And this normative command is, I've told you, you should not be biased. And now I do a conclusion. What we have learned in this lecture is that philosophy explains science, and that means philosophy answers why science has these characteristics that we know it has. And this is that science is the answer to that. The question is, what are characteristics of science? And answer is that science describes reality. I have depending on that answers in this lecture. But I've told you that to do science, before results, scientists should have an activity, and in activity the word should be used. Now, what is the normative command using should? And the command is that you should aim at universality. That means no bias, no person's opinion, no community opinion. Or a more common usage is that you should aim at objectivity. And that is the first introduction to what is science in this course as well. So that's the end. Thank you for watching it, and I guess more interesting lectures remain to come in the next 2 or 3 ones. So do not forget to subscribe to this channel.